I wanted to share some practical things that I did to make my work, to shift my work towards living out the faith more in my work life. So I will give a timestamp for when that part of the video happens. If you want to just skip over to there, you can skip all of the discourse about what I want to talk about with how life is being a software engineer, especially in this AI revolution that we're in. Feel free to look through that, and we will always start with the saint for today. So the date is May 11th, the feast day of Saints Philip and James, apostles. Saint Philip, like Peter and Andrew, was of Bethsaida. He was crucified in Phrygia, where he preached the gospel in 87. St. James the Less was of Cana and a kinsman of our Lord. He wrote one of the epistles of the New Testament. He was thrown from the terrace of the temple in 93. All the angels and the saints, please pray for us. So there is a word for that. Was it from a window? Oh, darn. It was from a terrace. But I was going to say there is a word that stuck with me that I learned in AP European history when I was in high school. And it's an interesting word called defenestration. And I thought it was so cool because it's such a cool long word. But it literally just means death by falling out of a window. So unfortunately, St. James the Less was just thrown off of a terrace instead of a window. But anyway, I digress. So I wanted to first say, excuse the rough appearance. I threw out my neck this morning, and this is like the second time it's happened this month. The last time I threw out my neck, I wasn't able to get out of bed, and I also wasn't able to work. So that was pretty bad for like a whole week. It's been a week since I wanted to talk about this topic, and it's been also a while, several months since I talked about more like Catholic working mom stuff, especially for the work that I do. So I work in the tech industry. I work as a software engineer, and I've been working there for 10 years now, 10 years especially in Silicon Valley. But before that, I was interning at Western Digital at their Orange County headquarters at the time when I was in graduate school. So it's been a fairly long time. But as far as like my seniority and my experience, I'm still technically like a software engineer, mid-level software engineer level. And what that means is by Google standards, that's an IC2 or an individual contributor 2. And then there's usually like 5 or 6 levels. I'm like 2. But technically, I think I'm more placed at the senior engineering level because I'm one of those slow burn people where I don't really want to promote unless I feel like I'm mostly qualified. So like, I don't know, 70-80% ready for promotion. But a lot of people a lot of really ambitious, especially like younger engineers, like to promote when they feel only like 50% qualified. So everyone likes to move up the ladder quickly, and I'm a little bit of I like to take my time and enjoy the ride. But I remember last week I wanted to make this video mainly because I had the realization of the revolution in technology that we're in, because we are technically in the AI revolution. And I was like, I walked into to work that week. I had so much anxiety and so many concerns about the state of the industry, the state of my work, the things that we had to adapt to. And it was a lot. And if you're not very familiar about what it's like in the tech industry, well, we're software engineers, so we write the code that makes your applications or your apps on your phones, on your desktop, everything that you see on the internet. Those are all apps, and those are the things that I work with and create. And they all come with very different levels of complexity. Some are easier than others, which will probably eventually be offloaded to AI. And then some are extremely difficult problems that needs a lot of human context and information to be able to execute properly. And that's pretty much at the level that I operate at for the work that I do. So but when I was thinking about it at work last week, and I ended up having a lot of discussions with my leads, some principal engineers, and even my new manager, I just realized I just like had this strange epiphany that we are in a revolution, and that this was the technical information revolution that was the most disruptive that we've ever had in the information age since maybe the Y2K bug or the internet coming out. During that time, the internet and stuff was like all in its infancy. But now that the internet has kind of like matured to be more, I would say it's more like a teenager, like a young adult in its like almost 20s. Now we have AI come into the picture. AI is in its infancy, but we still have the internet and like everyone else who's used it. So it's kind of like a brand new toy, or maybe like, I don't know, maybe like a young adult having a baby to deal with. And it's like all new, so much stuff to learn and so much stuff to adjust and change to. But yeah, I was like thinking, especially as I look at my desk at work, and I have a copy of Rerum Novarum. It's just sitting on my desk all the time whenever I feel like I need to read it. And I just remember Rerum Novarum is a papal encyclical written by Pope Leo XIII. And this was at the time of the Industrial Revolution, like at the time when trains started coming in, things like they had, I think they were starting to have typewriters at the time, and work was just changing so much. And the workforce was changing drastically because of the new things that were being kind of the new technology and things that were automating, and were also like getting rid of more manual labor at the time. So I have that at my desk. And I was thinking, I think that's where the realization hit. And I was like, wow, we are at an information revolution, the AI revolution. And I was just like thinking, at the time, I was thinking, this is so much. I was thinking like how the the industry was moving so fast that academia is moving too slow, and that there's no way that I could only imagine like how much of an in like a crazy influx of like information is being changed in academia right now, because we're like in the middle of it. There's no way that they can teach something without it being outdated in a couple weeks or a couple months, let alone like having their new information stick around within and be relevant in that semester or trimester alone that they're teaching it. So I was thinking about all those things, and then I was also thinking like the work that I'm doing and the work that other people in tech have to keep up with is just like is has like 10x, or what that means is like it's multiplied by 10 times with the work that we had to do before. And I mean before AI, we were already doing a lot. We were already expected to do a lot of things, to the point where I felt like it was really unsustainable. We were expected to do lots of code development, planning, design, and think about how to solve all of these complex problems in usually a pretty limited amount of time. So that's where I felt like it was difficult just being in, I guess that was more like now the Middle Ages. I would say like the Dark Ages was before we actually had code editors and like some autocomplete stuff and linters. But now we're like in the Middle Ages, and now we're starting to move into the more modern age with AI agents and stuff. So now that now that we're like having to move away from the past and starting to actually adapt, I was like reaching out to my managers saying, this is kind of like, in order for us to stay alive in this game, we have to know the game. We have to keep playing it, which is playing around with all of the AI agents, keeping up with the technologies. Otherwise, there's just going to be an impending mass layoff that could happen if we're not keeping up with technology. And I've heard many stories from my husband with his former coworkers that got laid off several years ago and still haven't found a job. And it's it's a sad reality that like that I guess fortunately my husband and I are still employed and have been able to survive through those hard times during the pandemic when there were large mass layoffs. But now, like in order to survive, you really have to, like my husband and I have to keep thinking about keeping our foot in the game, and and constantly learning and evolving with the technologies. And it used to be that technologies we could expect change maybe every year or two. Now it's like we're getting a new AI agent that's popping up every couple of months, and we have to switch over everything that we learned from the previous one and try to test it out and see if it's it's like find out a whole new workflow of how we're going to do our work. And when I mentioned earlier that it's like we have 10x the work that we've done, like AI has been so disruptive in that I feel like I have been consuming 10 times more information with the work that I do than before. And that's why I was getting overwhelmed last week, because I felt like my brain can't hold on anymore. There's so much that I have to read, that we have to review, that we have to double check and make sure that it's not making any mistakes. And on top of that, it's like it's completely changing the way that we have to work, for better or worse. It seems like it's going to stick around and stay, and it will continue to evolve until things start leveling out. But right now, it's still pretty much the beginning, and it really was extremely overwhelming, and I was starting to like really question what it would be like to continue, like really question like how everyone was able to maintain balance in all of it. So those are just like a lot of the things that were on my mind last week. And it's just, now that I had some time over the weekend to like step away from work and just give myself some clarity, especially from having my chats with my leads and principal engineers and just more seasoned, experienced people in the industry than myself. I had some people who had the same feelings as me, but some who are also really optimistic about it. So I think that's where it's great that I didn't keep myself in a silo and kind of like reached out within my local like tech community, within my coworkers, to be able to kind of get out of my head and see what other people are experiencing, and to feel like, to kind of see the opportunity and hope that they can see in it all. So I think one of the things that my lead engineer told me was that AI just makes it even more important for people in the tech industry to have their computer science foundations, to have their academic foundations very strong and very solid, because there was a big boom like in the 2015s, 2010s, where a lot of people were switching into software engineering through like boot camps and stuff. So they would go through maybe like a year-long boot camp or so, and then get enough skills just to be able to work in a software company. But now that we're pivoting over into AI, it's becoming even more important to have the software engineering foundations to be able to spot all the things that AI is missing. So that's where I was like really grateful to to have that to have that academic background. And then also, yeah, just being, I think that gives a good edge for people who went through a more classic traditional route for education in that sense. Because even my husband was kind of questioning, would our kids even need to go to college if AI is going to take away all the jobs, quote. So I think that my lead's argument for that was very sound, because yeah, that would probably make it more difficult for people who do not have that background. So that was comforting to hear. And then also to hear like the advice that we're just going to have to learn how to change the way that we work. Because I think that was one of the things that I was really struggling with, because I really like coding. I really like being able to type up code and see see what I make on a computer and just like be really proud of something that I made. That's like the gift of God for like of the work of human hands. That's what I would equate for what a software engineer does on a computer. But now if we're kind of like offsetting off to an AI, I was feeling a bit apprehensive and a little bit sad. I was kind of like grieving the fact that that part of coding will probably likely eventually go away, and we're just going to end up doing like design docs or something and just doing design review. But it does pave a way for us to be able to do more difficult problems. Like we're gonna, rather than be in the trenches and doing code development, it leads us to have to access higher levels of problems more in the design, software design level or architectural level. So those are some things that I have been looking forward to doing more of in my career, because the development, the coding part really does take most of the time. But with AI being able to do that like 5 to 10 times faster than I can code myself, it really does like elevate being able to move me up more into the architectural level. So I think it's very lucky that it's kind of all playing out that way in my career, because it's also very timely. But I also do worry for people who are just starting out in the industry, because they don't have that experience for going through the code and like typing it out and making mistakes and imprinting those mistakes and learnings through failure, because that's really what software engineering is. We learn, and engineering in general, we learn through failure. Like we have to humble ourselves and like temper our pride to be able to stick in this industry or stay around in this industry, because we really do fail a lot. There was so many times I struggled with writing code and it not working out, and even like crying over it, because it would just be so frustrating. So I really don't know about like the future of the new people that are coming into this industry, because they will not have that experience with AI, but maybe they might not need it. I don't know. But yeah, that does make me grateful to have had that experience, to be able to learn through failure and just really have that experience, because that's one of the best ways I personally learn, and that's how I feel like it's made me very a lot better in this industry. So there is that. But now fast forward to past the weekend, and now today is Monday, and we got a new AI agent that we wanted to trial in the company. And as I was setting it up, I was realizing, wow, I already like know exactly what I wanted to do, how to set it up at a very, very high level to a very advanced level. So that was another thing that I was kind of like, my eyes were open to. And when I was talking to the leads and engineers, or the engineering leads, and they asked me like, do you talk to people outside of the industry about how they're using AI? And I was like, no, not really. I have my husband and he's a software engineer, and we just talk about how we're using AI in our companies. And that's where my lead engineer like smiled, and he said that you don't realize how far advanced and at the front lines we are of this technology. Like I guess I never realized it before. So when he mentioned that, I gain an appreciation for the work that we're doing. I mean, it's extremely hard. We're honestly constantly changing the plan every day. We're learning, if not every week, it's almost every day. We're learning something new every week from using AI agents and using the new tech and learning the new technologies, that even documentation for installation gets outdated within a couple of days. It's pretty incredible. So I guess when he mentioned that, I guess I never realized how like fortunate we are to be in this position, to be this far at the forefront of this technology. So I guess that does come with the territory of being at the front, like at the cutting edge of everything. And I guess I just needed to hear that. So that did help me a lot with a lot of my fears and struggles of feeling behind in the industry. But it turns out we're there at the front with everyone else and being competitive about it. So I felt a little bit better about that. And and then I mentioned that I came back this week, and as I was setting up things for the new AI agent that I was learning, it was really cool to be able to see how much I'd grown and how much I'd evolved from where I was even a month ago or even a couple of weeks ago. Because now I'm like pulling a new AI or agent and just setting everything up with much proficiency. And now I can just like go quickly about doing work on an entire new project and like stress testing that AI agent and see how well I can compare it to a previous one, which is my current task right now. So that is extremely cool. I think I just sat at my computer today and I was like, what a time to be alive and to be able to experience something like this. And I was like, and then I thought back to the faith and I was like, how I really wonder what it would be like for a Catholic saint to be going through something like this, how they would have handled things like this innovation and this revolution. So I guess it's to be determined, or maybe I can look back and find some saints that did were like at the forefront of whatever industry or whatever study that they were doing and learn from what those saints did. But it's it's just incredible after I had all of those realizations. So yeah, that's really just what I wanted to share about how things were kind of as a follow-up to my AI video from last year because it's changed so much. But but yeah, I guess as a follow-up to that video, I mentioned like treating AI with respect, with treating it, well, I guess initially like as a child, but now I still continue to treat it with respect. I even say, please do this. Please make sure to have a high quality, have high qualities in how you approach things. And I kind of challenge it if I think there's like shortcuts it's taking. But I think keeping up with using it as a tool, but also maintaining dignity and integrity in the work that I do is is still like the forefront of how I am approaching using AI. So so yeah, there's that. And I did mention I wanted to talk about practical things that I did to make my work with and Catholicism work together better. Maybe is that the right way to word it? That's it. I did mention that I wanted to like talk about the things that I started to do that made my life more Catholic in the workplace. So there's like 5 short items, and I just have them listed down here on my computer. But but yeah, these are especially for me. So I guess a little background, if it's helpful, is that I am a cradle Catholic. But when after I went to college, I kind of got distracted and got really busy with one, I was out of a really structured daily life with going from high school into public high school into a university. So I went to the University of California, Irvine, and they don't have set schedules. It's kind of like you pick your classes, you go whenever the classes happen, and everything else afterwards, it's all on your own. So I did not do very well with that. And I ended up going to starting to work. And I wasn't practicing as a Catholic at the time. I didn't switch to different denominations, but I wasn't going to Mass. And I was pretty poorly catechized after having gone to like Sunday school or not, it wasn't Sunday school, but it was CCD, which is where we learned our catechism on a weekly basis. But yeah, by the time, especially since I was like a first generation college student in America, I was just so focused on getting my career. And that's a lot of the struggle of millennials at the time, especially Asian American millennials. So as I came back to the faith, I realized that there was really a lot of stuff that I was not doing, and a lot of it were mistakes that I had made working and prioritizing work. So these were the things that I did to practice my faith better, especially as a worker, and now as a working mom. So the first thing that I did was for work is to pre-schedule all holy days. So what that means is I set PTO for all the holy days, especially the ones that we don't get as national holidays. So what I would do is I would look up the holy days for the year, and usually around Christmas time when work is off, so I have a lot of free time to be able to do all of that extra administrative work for myself. So around Christmas holidays, I will look at I will request PTO for all of the holy days in the year that are not on a weekend or on a national holiday. So that was my first step. And that way I wouldn't have any excuse or have to go to confession because I didn't realize that I had to work on a holy day. So that was one of the first easy things that I started doing, and that's now happening on a yearly basis. So the second thing, which I actually think is even more important, was I stopped working on Sundays unless it was absolutely necessary. And especially since I came from a startup background and in tech, we have our own work laptop that we can take home. We could literally work 24/7 if we wanted. And when I was younger, I was just so busy, like working long hours, working late into the night, and even working over the weekends, that working on Sundays was just something that didn't occur to me was actually not good. So I stopped working on Sundays, and I can't tell you how many graces it's been to no longer work on Sundays, to just like completely cut out that terrible habit. I didn't have to confess it anymore, and I was able to be more present and more intentional being at home with my family and focusing on prayer, the mass, and just doing my earthly vocation here, which is to be a mother and a wife. So that I think was a huge shift in my work. And then another thing that I do daily now, especially for commuting to work, is I consecrate that time to prayer. So I have around like a 35-minute commute, and during my morning commute, I sing the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I sing the Hour of Lauds. And on the way home in the afternoon, it usually takes like 40 minutes to an hour to get home, depending on traffic. I will sing Vespers. So I have two of the hours that my spiritual director asked me to do for my Sabbatine privilege, which, because, where did I put it? I hope my brown scapular didn't fall out. But, oh, no, I have it. It's in my pocket. But yeah, because I tweaked my neck, I've just been wearing it holding it in my pocket. But yeah, my spiritual director asked me to at least pray Lauds, Vespers, and Compline of the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary as part of my Sabbatine privilege requirement. So I will definitely try to put this on when I can finally reach my hands over my head. But right now it's too painful. I might just ask my husband to do it for me. But yes, so consecrating the commute time to prayer has been very, very helpful. And even before, when I was commuting and working in San Francisco, so I had to take public transportation, I would just like put on headphones and either read off of a Kindle, or I have also like this rosary ring, which is what I would use to pray the rosary while I was commuting on the BART. So if you like kind of do mental prayer for the rosary, it takes around like 15 to 20 minutes at the fastest. So that was plenty of time for me to pray the rosary every time I commuted to work. And then also sometimes I would even watch mass if I had time. So yeah, that is for consecrating the time for commute to prayer. And the fourth thing that I started to do was keeping a Catholic book at my desk and using that as like a physical way to detach myself from technology, to detach myself from modernity. As I guess another cheeky way of saying it. But yeah, my spiritual director just started advising me that, are you reading books instead of being on technology? Are you reading about the saints or the writings of the saints? So that is one of the things that I have left at my desk at work. I haven't had any issues with it, and we're in California, so we don't have to worry about whether our books will be a problem. So that's kind of nice that I can just leave that on my desk, and if I'm taking a 15-minute break, I'll take that book and read it and spend some time either doing Lectio Divina or reading something from the saints. Right now I have Rerum Novarum on my desk, so I just read one passage a day, and that's been very helpful with my faith life. And then the last thing that I have done and added to my workday is, which is actually for every day, is I have a 12 o'clock alarm on my phone, and it's just a little ding bell. And that's to tell me it's 12 o'clock. Stand up and pray the Angelus. So that gives me an oral reminder to just stop everything and pray. So just sending that reminder on my phone has been really great, because I'll just stand up, and I can kind of get pretty sneaky with it. I'll just stand up and put my desk into standing desk mode, and I will just pray the Angelus there, and it's beautiful to be able to do that. So it's a beautiful way to break up my day, and also gets me to go eat lunch, because when I was in my younger days of working, I would literally just plow through lunch working and coding the whole time, because I would get so transfixed on wanting to finish my work or doing more work that I would just skip all of that. So being able to remind myself that I need to pray, I need to take some time with the Lord, and just not make too much priority out of work, was a great way to break up my workday and offer it up to the Lord. So those are those are some of the tips and little things that I started doing to be more Catholic in this day and age while I work. So yeah, I'm interested in the things that you do to add more of the faith into your work, if you currently work or had worked before. And I understand it can be really difficult. I mean, like, it can be really difficult to keep up with the faith, especially with so many distractions with work. So I'm always open to hearing more advice on that, or open to hearing other people's experiences. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. And as always, thank you for being here. I appreciate the time, and God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.